Artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming a large part of how we interact with the world. It's integrated into our phones, cars, and even fridges. AI is also developing an ever-increasing niche in the world of art. When some artists hear this, their first reaction is to recoil in disgust. After all, art is considered by many to be one of the few things that can't be automated away with technological progress. But what if AI didn't have to be a dystopian replacement of human creativity with numbers and code? What if we can harness the power of AI to develop and enhance our own creative potential? Today I'm going to be going through a brief history of AI, the artists who use it, and how you can start to use it in your work. Artificial intelligence is a fairly broad term. It encompasses a wide range of things from sat-nav directions to self-driving cars to Snapchat filters. But for our purposes, IBM defines AI as the ability of a computer or machine to mimic the capabilities of the human mind. AI emerged in the mid-1900s as a statistical tool for predicting future events based on previous information. Throughout the 20th century, as computers got faster, AI began to take on new and exciting forms.
In 1997, Garry Kasparov, a Russian chess grandmaster, played a series of games against IBM's Deep Blue artificial intelligence that resulted in Kasparov becoming the first world champion to lose a game to a computer. Instead of seeing this as a failure, Kasparov saw a way for him to improve his skills by utilizing the analytical power of systems like Deep Blue. He began to pursue ways of partnering with AI to develop his own abilities. Chess computers can use brute force to analyze millions of moves and select the most optimal ones. Grandmasters, on the other hand, have the benefit of human intuition and creativity. When they work in tandem, they are far greater than the sum of their parts. The same is true in weather forecasting, where even today's most powerful computers can still be improved upon by 10 to 20% by a skilled human forecaster. AI's powerful analytical insight can be combined with our human creativity and intuition to make a formidable pairing, what psychologist Klein calls a centaur intelligence. But how does this relate to art?
There is a growing movement of artists who believe the same concept of hybrid or centaur intelligence can be applied to the artistic process. In this setup, the human collaborator is creative and has intuition as to what looks and sounds good, while the AI collaborator is able to examine trends analytically and find out, for example, what characteristics the artist finds appealing.
Imagine you're painting a picture, and you've selected 3 colours that you think work well together. After painting for a while, you realise that you need a 4th colour, but you're not sure which ones will go with the colours you've already used. What if you could give those colours to an artificial intelligence system and have it provide you with insights into what the colours have in common? For example, emotions associated with them, or the physical red, green and blue values that make up the colours. The system could then suggest a few colours for you to try, saving you time and deliberation and advancing your knowledge of colour theory.
AI art can largely be traced back to a system built in the 1970s by artist Cohen called AARON.
AARON is a program designed to identify the building blocks of images. It can differentiate figure and ground, inside and outside. AARON began as a computer program that created instructions for a small robot with a paintbrush attached to it. The robot would move around a space drawing shapes and figures. It was never taught object-specific information, just the primitive forms of art, yet it managed to create recognizable and creative figures.
Cohen and his AARON robot never made it into the mainstream. Even outside of art, statistical models started to move away from artificial intelligence. It was too complicated and required too much computational power. Throughout the 80s and 90s, new methods emerged that almost entirely eclipsed AI. We entered what came to be known as the AI winter. However, thanks to a slew of computational innovations, a new type of artificial intelligence called the neural network Alexander Morvantsev figured out that one way of doing this is to flip the neural network upside down. Normally, you give a neural net an input and it will give you a classification. For example, you put in an apple and it tells you it's a fruit. Morvantsev altered this process so that you put in an image and it gradually changes it so as to better match a given classification. This technique, called Deep Dream, created some incredible psychedelic results.
Deep Dream spawned a wave of new artists and inspired programmers to develop more artistic techniques with AI. One of these artists is Daniel Ambrosi. Ambrosi is a landscape photographer who developed a form of computational photography to create immersive landscape images. However, he found that even with his technique, normal photographs didn't quite capture the experience that he had when he saw the views that he photographed. He said, "If I want others to experience via a static image what I was experiencing in the real world, I would have to find a way to create images that moved people, not just visually, but also cognitively." Inspired by images made by Deep Dream, he began to produce what he calls Dreamscapes, landscape photographs put through a modified version of the Deep Dream algorithm. Ambrosi says that using AI in his work has enhanced his ability to see creatively and changed how he interprets landscapes. Another artist is Lisa Corey, who specializes in figurative art. She describes her work as constantly trying to find more complex and richer textures. In 2016, she started a project called Assisted Visions, which uses an algorithm called Neural Style Transfer with the aim of developing her personal style. The Neural Style Transfer algorithm takes a content and a style image. It then creates an output with the content, such as shapes and figures, of one of the images, and the style, like textures and colours, of the other image. Instead of using this technique to mix the styles of other artists, she put her own art through the algorithm as a quick way of experimenting with different textures. She drew the same portrait 5 times, but with different expressive qualities, then drew 5 textures, attempting to capture a range of colours and density. Corey then applied a style transfer on every portrait and every texture. She describes the result as versions of the same portrait combined out of elements that I had drawn, but recombined with details I wouldn't have thought of myself. Using AI allowed her to experiment and develop her style without using up materials and lots of time. The last artist I'll mention is Mario Klingemann. He differs from the previous two in that he is an AI artist first and foremost. He was one of the pioneers in the field, having worked with computer-generated art for most of his career, whether it be glitch, evolutionary, or generative art. Klingemann's Memories of Passers-by 1 was one of the first AI artworks to be bought in a traditional auction house, selling for $50,000 at Sotheby's. It is comprised of 2 screens displaying live artwork generated by an algorithm trained on thousands of portraits by old artists. The images that this produces have been described as convulsive beauty. This artwork gives the viewer the opportunity to watch an artificial intelligence system think in real time. His other works include his Neural Glitch series. The original portraits are developed by a generative algorithm. However, while generating the portrait, Klingemann interferes with the computational process, creating glitches in the patterns. This artwork gives us an insight into how neural network systems function internally. They are often thought of as a black box that takes inputs, performs unknown calculations, and then produces a desired output. But the glitches in Klingemann's art show patterns that could further our understanding of these systems.
These few examples are just a small selection of the many forms of art that can be created using AI. Some have said that bringing computation into art removes its soul. I hope this video has demonstrated how AI can be used not to remove all humanity from art, but to enhance it. You may not have noticed, but all the music used in this video was generated using AI. That might sound dystopian at first, but the process left plenty of space for me to inject my own instructions about how I wanted it to sound and feel. As a musician, I didn't feel like I was being automated away, but rather like a new tool had been added to my creative arsenal. Most of the tools that go into creating AI art are developed under open licenses. This means that anybody can experiment with these incredible tools. I've linked in the description some resources that require almost no prior programming knowledge. Whether AI becomes a mainstay in art or a forgotten fringe movement of the 2010s remains uncertain. But if you want to step into the world of AI art, then now is definitely the time to do it.